So it's good to have you guys. My name is Dr. Strother. And I've already gotten to talk a little bit in here with Sergio and Sheena and Evan. And so we are going to dive right in to our capstone course. And I'll be the first to tell you that this is my first go around at Biola at my first class. And so I know it's kind of an interesting mix because you've probably went through most of the coursework with familiar professors and all the different disciplines that you'll be going through, of course, in the CFP coursework. And so um, I've done my best and will continue to try to do my best to fit the mold that they've established. And I'm really impressed with Dr. Annette's work just establishing the curriculum for this class. And so I'm pretty excited to dive right in. So probably many of you are asking, who are you and where are you from? What are you doing? And so I will give a little bit of background, just to kind of let you all know a little bit about the story of how I started kind of looking at this option for this class. I am a financial planner in Hannibal, Missouri. Any of you guys know where that is? Maybe Sergio?
Is it near the border, near Mississippi?
It is, yeah, yeah, yep, right on the Mississippi, about halfway between Kansas City and Chicago. Um, did I say that right, Sergio? Chicago. There you go. And so grew up in Illinois, and then moved up here for undergraduate. Really didn't concern myself with many choices in college other than options to play college baseball. And so this was a good place for me. It's a solid Christian university, a Baptist university, and really enjoyed my time here. Ended up, getting going through all the things, that sometimes come along with an undergraduate degree. Had a serious girlfriend in the area and ended up staying here to teach. And so got a job as a high school teacher at a very small school, taught like everything under the sun, English, history, psych and soc. And then also in Missouri, it's a requirement to teach personal finance. And so I really enjoyed that. And it was like definitely my favorite class. Felt like it was a senior class. I really had a tough time with like freshman high school, like squirrels, and I kind of clicked a little bit more with the older students. And so had the opportunity to look into like what would I do if I was going to be a professor or if I was going to get a PhD. And so ended up finding a good program at Kansas State University. And so ended up getting accepted into the PhD program there. And it only took me like 6 years, but ended up finishing. And then after kind of in the midst of that, transitioned as well to a university job here in town at Hannibal LaGrange University. So taught personal finance, was able to start a financial planning track for our business students. And then also, and really more of my job then was coaching baseball. And had envisioned, to kind of stay in the academic field. And so a couple of years ago, I actually I was pursued by a faith-based financial planning firm here in our town. And it was really just a kind of a godsend as well. A lot of small private universities struggle. And so that was one thing that we were in the midst of some financial turmoil as well at the school. So anyway, nonetheless, I ended up taking that position, which has been a total blessing and actually a very, I think, good step in also the professorial part of what I do, because I'm, actually able to have experience with clients and be able to sit down and meet with them and be a practitioner in financial planning. So the name of our firm is Benson Financial Group. We've got 7 planners at our office. Just a couple of years ago when I started, I think I was the 3rd or 4th one they had hired. So it's a really, really neat place, but also gives me an opportunity to, hopefully give a little bit because, this is a capstone class. I can give, some real life examples of sitting across the table, maybe from some people that, you're going to be able to read in the textbook and actually see some examples. But, that's a big part of what this class is supposed to be. So, anyway, all that being said, we were at the Kingdom Advisor Conference in February out down in Orlando. I went to Dr. Annette's Worldview presentation and just really enjoyed it. Was like checking out of my room, supposed to be leaving with my wife to go catch a flight right after his presentation. And so like I ran up to her, like found her and said, "Hey, I'm gonna talk to this other professor for a minute. I really liked what he had to say." And I was just curious about his what his background was. Didn't know anything about him. And so was able to find him right before he's leaving the room. And sure enough, like he tells me like, "Oh, he has a PhD from Kansas State University," which I hadn't met him yet. So totally kind of a God thing, really, and a good opportunity for us to connect. And so that's kind of led us down the road of being able to teach this class. And so really, really excited. I've taught online classes at Kansas State, again at that university in our town, Hannibal LaGrange, and so excited to kind of get the ball rolling here and kind of get to know you guys. So if you're good with it, we'll just go ahead and I'll share my screen and we can dive right into the material. Do you guys have any questions so far? Questions about me? So we do my family. We have three little ones now in our house: a 9, a 6, and a 2-year-old. And so you guys would probably be. My wife would be mad at me if I didn't share too much or if I didn't share anything about them, right? So start with a couple pictures that we've taken recently. The town that we live in, Hannibal's kind of a little Americana town, about 20,000 people, but we've got a few things that people like to do. Mark Twain grew up here, so that's advertised ad nauseum almost. But anyway, we went to just this week, last week, and I'd never been to this place, but there's some caves around, so we went to the Mark Twain cave. And so here's a picture of my wife, Janelle, our oldest, Elijah. He's 9. Dude's in the Pokemon, if you can't tell. Jetta, there in the back is 6, and this is our little guy Abram. He's 2. Abram, we were able to actually officially adopt him. He's not ours by genetics, but we started the foster process with him when he was real little, just out of the hospital, and so we adopted him just a few months back, and so our family has been growing in all the cool, exciting ways. This is my son Eli. He loves playing outside in our yard. We've got a few acres out in the country, and so he's showing off this little Luna moth that he had found. And the dude is, yeah, he's high energy but pretty fun. We were gonna the moth was about dead. We were gonna resuscitate it, but then our cat ate it. So anyway, here's a picture of our family out on the river. This one we took just a little while ago, and then this is our little guy Abram. He's big into catching the chickens. That's like his favorite thing. We got 10 chickens around the house, so he's always out grabbing them. So I thought I'd show the picture of that, and then that mischievous cat of ours with our daughter there, and the cat's name Izzy. He named her. So anyway, that's a little bit of our family. Always welcome to if you want to email me or shoot me messages, asking about this and that. Don't hesitate to, right? Because the hard part about this type of class is like you don't really have as much human connection even with your professor. And so don't hesitate at all to reach out to me for whatever reason. Like that's what I'm here for. As a matter of fact, and I tell my undergrad kids this at students this at Hannibal LaGrange, like I know some professors probably don't like being texted. I'm not in that boat. I actually kind of almost prefer it because in the world of email, between my work email, the university email I have already at the other school I'm teaching at, my personal email, and the one at Biola. It's like I think I'd rather be able to respond in a timely manner pretty quickly, and usually text messages can be, if it's not an extenuous email with maybe some greater detail and things like that. If it's just a short little question, you can send me a text message. Don't hesitate to. And so you'll find that somewhere in here. I believe that's in the announcements, as well as it should be also be in the syllabus. And so let's go ahead and kind of dive into the course in Canvas. The capstone course is kind of meant, of course, to be a sum of what you've learned so far, right? So we take risk management, insurance, income tax, retirement, investments, estate planning, and kind of roll it into one big plan. And so really, if you look at kind of what we're doing in this class, the class is going to be weighted toward the one big financial plan that you're going to be synthesizing it and putting together throughout the course of this class. And so it's going to be one of these things. I'm going to go and say it before I forget it, but like, you're going to put together a plan and I'm going to grade it. I'm only going to give you a small grade for it. Really, what I'm doing is I'm kind of giving you a rough draft. These are the things you need to work on so that whenever we get to the end, we get to week 7, week 8, where you guys are putting together that final financial plan. You're actually going to be creating your own in your own fictional financial planning business. You can then have this, rough draft, this stuff that you've put together that we can work to, then polish and finish off the right way. And so that's kind of the big thing that you're working on. But then, of course, we've got some smaller stuff as well. We've got some cases that are coming out of the textbook. We got some quizzes along the lines. And so you can see that's all going to be outlined here in the syllabus. I'm sure this is the normal way of you guys seeing the different assignments that are due. So one thing I've always done is I've always started assignments on Monday and I've always made them due on Sunday nights. Sergio, is like a lot of your classes in the past, did they had assignments due on Sunday or is it usually Monday?
Usually it's due Monday at 2 a.m. Central. So it's the midnight,
Yeah.
midnight cuff.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for sharing that. I might change that. That's not something that I'm necessarily like bound to. It's just my normal rhythm. I go through and I go, oh, everything needs to be due on Sunday nights. And so if it does help, I might go ahead and go ahead and just move those back. I hadn't really thought of that until I'd moved most of them, and I was thinking about that today, and I was like, um, those little rhythms sometimes, especially when you're going through a cohort style 8-week class, you don't. I wouldn't think about it much as an outsider because I'm used to the Sunday night deadline, but for some of you that might be an important piece to that. And so, furthermore, if you're asking questions about the week's material that's coming due on the day when we're meeting, or in the evening and night when we're meeting, it might be a little. You might be cutting it close, not to say it wouldn't be a normal rhythm. So anyway, yeah, just keep an eye on those. Maybe I'll go ahead and probably move those back one day. It won't make any difference to me. So as you can see, this week we've got 2 smaller client type of assignments. Those are, again, the client. Anything you see with the word client in front of it is really a bigger financial planning piece that you're going to be building out. And then we have a case assignment, which is going to be taken straight out of the textbook in chapter 14. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. And we can talk a little on that Zimmer case today. And then you've got a quiz. And so I'll go ahead and kind of start there. The quiz is something that it goes off of chapter 2 in the text. Chapter 2 is pretty dry. It's really just like all the different ways that you can use the time value of money, or you can use the different methods of finding returns on investments to figure out answers to things. And so again, this class is not meant to be like, hey, a math class with math questions that you need to have memorized formulas and things like that. As a matter of fact, as you prepare, if you're planning on taking the CFP class, that's not really going to be, or taking the CFP, exam. That's not really going to be something that's a need, right? Like, yeah, you should have a baseline understanding of holding period returns and IRR and NPV and things like that. But that's not the heart and soul of what that class is like. So anyway, uh, go ahead and take that quiz. Look, you're allowed 12 attempts. So it's one of those kind of things, you can retake it until you get the grade you want. Dr. Annette does give a little background here into that. I'll be honest, like I cut my teeth on the HP10 BII Plus. I'm sure a lot of you guys have used this. Recently, I finally ran out of batteries in mine, and now I got some batteries that are like too small, so I have to push in the back all the time to get it on. But this is the best tool I have. I even keep it at work all the time, right? Because there's so many instances when I need to just see the time value of implication. I need to show this to a client. Um, and yeah, I mean, in a nutshell, personal finance really has so much, right? Comes down to the time value of money. And so having this as a tool and being able to use this is pretty immensely valuable. And I will even say, like, a lot of really good financial planners, like they have this sitting on their desk at their office, because I've seen it personally. So anyway, there's the quiz for you. Go back to the syllabus. And I will say, I've always used a moduling kind of setup, because for some reason, I know it's very similar to what you guys have here. This is kind of like the module link. I went ahead and created a module link just because I like also to see the different assignments as so. That's just kind of what I'm used to. So you'll see the point values and things like that as well with them. Um, so yeah, if you look at the first one, and I will link our video in here to this right here, but basically, you are going to be creating a financial plan with a firm of your own, the Das family or clients. And so you're going to be basically going through that process of, creating an engagement letter. Dr. Net's done a really a good job of putting examples all throughout the text. And so here you'll see some examples. And also at the end, you'll also see there is actual examples of financial plans that people have done in the past. Of course, it's over a different plan, the Bedos, the Freemans, the Obings, but you're able to look at that and kind of see with the end in mind what you're trying to create. And so here's the DOS case as well, for you to look in that, explore that, and yeah, kind of go from there. So that's the very first thing you want is to do is the initial documents, kind of lining things up. And then after that, the first kind of dive into the planner type of relationship piece will be the cash flow planning. And so, here we're looking at things that will have their current, the couples or households financial position. You're going to need to put in some of the ratio analysis stuff that you've learned in the past. Looking at I call it the big three, show their balance sheet, their net worth, their income statement. Speaking, just kind of looking at this a lot of times in financial planning, and I think that the lesson that we're going to dive into here with the PowerPoints here in a second. A lot of financial planning is not about like prescribing the answer to somebody after you look and see where their numbers are, right? Like so much of it is the balance between art and that art and science. Like there's a softer nature to it that requires a lot of understanding of human psychology and sociology that's rolled into it. How what makes people tick even. And so, as you go through these things, yeah, you're gonna need to just give the numbers at times, and sometimes uh personal finance is finance, right? But then there's also so often that you have to encounter the person before you do that. And so just keep that in mind, as you begin with this engagement letter, as you begin with the cash flow planning piece, right? Like client friendly. That's something that means that you need to do more than just create spreadsheet after spreadsheet after spreadsheet. We had before I started doing financial planning at the firm I'm at, they had used a program called SIPS, and SIPS is just this ultimate spreadsheet of like 1,000 lines in each direction. And you could show the client, like, oh, look, if we extrapolate this and this, and you grow your money at 6% over 30 years, we can see that number and how it plays into the plan over the course of like 15 different columns. And it's like, this is not interactive, it's not interpersonal, it's not user friendly. And so thankfully we've come a long ways in financial planning, like the technology side of things. I would say that's one aspect that is immensely useful. And it is mentioned too in this material. You do have access to eMoney or Money Guide Pro. Those are good tools, to actually go through the process of creating a sandbox type of an account is useful for you guys because, if you do plan on going into, a financial planning position further down the road, having a really good understanding of those softwares is really helpful because a lot of them are pretty interactive nowadays and really help you understand or help you walk the client through maybe a little bit more of an interactive process with them. We use Right Capital at our work because it's very simple. It's something actually, we don't tell clients this too often, but if you wanted to, you could build a plan for someone like in 15 minutes. Of course, you could spend 15 hours as well if you wanted to, or if you needed to, with a more complex case. But the point is, like, you're able to go in and dial tools and help them understand things, right? So it's not just throwing Monte Carlo analysis in your face or, all of these, lines of sheets with graphs that people look at and they're just scratching their head, to be honest. And so, that's a big part of our field and something that we'll even talk on here in a minute whenever we get to the slides. So, yeah, let's go ahead and dive into. Well, before we get into the lesson, let's first also talk on the Zimmer case just really quickly. The cases come out of the text, right? So I've kind of got the text pulled up here. This is, I think right now I've got it on chapter 2. So this is the computational aspect. It's written by Grable. Grable's a former K-State Georgia guy, does a really good job of presenting material and the case presentation stuff. The chapter 14 is going to be just a bunch of different cases. They're really short. So you're actually kind of, even though you might not know it, you're honing in on certain different aspects of the financial plan for somebody. And really, you're just kind of answering questions. You can present it like you would be maybe in a case, but it's more like, this is a scenario. Can you tell me the answers to these questions in relation to this person? And so this is chapter 14 here. You see the Zimmer case. It's a single lady. And so, she's got her little income and expenses here. It tells you a little bit about her profile, and so then the questions kind of come after this, right? So you can kind of see there, it's not going to hopefully take you too much time But it is another way for us to kind of dive into this material in an interactive way. I see we have someone else. Hi, Jason. Sorry, I didn't see you were on here. Thank you for joining.
All right, it was my son's birthday, so I was a little bit late.
Oh man, that's awesome. Glad you could enjoy it with him. Have you tucked him into bed or is it
He's getting tucked into bed
good
by
deal?
by mom. So
Hey, if you're like me, when I tuck my kids in the bed, my wife still has to come back and still tuck them in too. So anyway, thanks for joining us, man. Are there any questions that you guys have so far? All righty. So let's go ahead and dive into these lessons. These lessons, of course, are all available to you guys as well. Um, but they'll kind of go through the different chapters in that case studies book that we're talking about. One thing I haven't talked about before I get into this though is the once we get into week 2, you will be continuing the Certified Kingdom Advisor curriculum and the modules and things like that. So just be aware of that. I think that your first one won't be until, yeah, week 2, right? So kind of rounding off and finishing that process with you guys, which I think most of you should be fairly aware of that because it sounds like you're um, in the middle of or toward the end of that process. So um, yeah, so let's kind of dive into, what starting from the ground up, really. The text is quick to say, let's always be able to define what financial planning is and what the practice is. And so many of these definitions and this information comes straight from the CFP board. I remember when I first started this material at Kansas State, it was like the very first thing that we went over, and it was also the very last thing that we went over in the CFP curriculum. And so, here you see it denotes the process of determining whether and how an individual can meet life goals through proper management of financial resources. So a classic, real heavy definition, helping people with their money. Is a lot of times I just tell, like, whenever I'm trying to describe it to my 6-year-old, hey dad, what do you do? Because you know what she sells people. Oh, that's my dad. He's gonna go play on the computer and eat chocolates. That's what she thinks I do, because we always have big bowls of chocolates all over our firm. And so yeah, I eat a few too many chocolates whenever I'm sitting with clients, but what is it? What is it about? And so this all is, again, material that comes from the CFP board, but it's about establishing and defining client planner relationships, then gathering data, analyzing it, developing presentations and recommendations for client need or changes in their patterns that they need to make in order to reach their goals, right? And it's a cyclical process. It's not a matter of start to finish like a very short little sprint race would be, watching the Olympic time trials. It's nothing like that because it's an ongoing process with clients. And I will say too, our world, I actually like what has been done kind of with this definition, because you see something that does pop up over again, and you'll see it here, you'll see it in a few other places, but it is a relationship that you're building, right? Financial planning is more than just um, a transaction where someone is wanting someone else to take care of or manage their finances, like help me with my rollover because I stopped working somewhere and my 401k plan is telling me I have to move my money. you know, like that is a transaction. They need some help. You know, they don't maybe want to open their own brokerage account at Schwab or don't feel comfortable doing that. Um, so they come to a financial planner, but we're supposed to do more than just be that transactional type of person. In that situation, sometimes that's all that person might be looking for. But really the goal here is you want to build a relationship with a client, right? Help them understand what their goals are. You know, it might involve a little bit of discovery even, you know, things that the client didn't even know that they wanted as you begin the process with them. But yeah, it's definitely something that is tied to relationships and an understanding of who a person is. And so much of that is wildly intentional. You know, as we look at the standard of conduct, you know, I remind you guys of where the financial planning industry has come from. You know, it used to almost purely be a sort of transactional process with commissionable products that were bought and sold. You know, most of those kind of tied to some insurance type of need or product out there. And so those products were expensive. Those products a lot of times also didn't necessarily provide people with the cleanest and clearest you know, financial planning solutions. It was just a purely transactional process. And so it's kind of neat to see how that field has changed and shifted over time. All right, where now a lot of business out there is relationship focused in a way that, yeah, of course, it's still business, you know, and you know, it still has assets under management behind it, but it might have a different type of feel to it because of the advisory focus that it has, right? Where you know, you're building a relationship with someone and trying to put them in lower cost funds, but really the reason why people work with you is because they trust you and because you know, you have their best thought in mind. And so that is, you know, that piece of the fiduciary rule that you guys, I'm sure, are familiar with and have heard many times, right? The process, the code of ethics, the rules of conduct are all there to help establish that guideline that we're, you know, and even as Christians, right? Like we're called not just to transact with people. We're called to hopefully see them be transformed in a way that maybe we can help foster. Would be a way we could put that, right? Transformational over transactional. And so that's something that you know, I've found it applies really to everything. If you're ever going to be dealing with people, you know, I used to joke whenever I was in a coaching role that was the world, right? The world of athletics is totally transactional. What can you do for my team to put me in the best spot to win? And if you can't do that, then like, you know, you're not helping me out or helping our team out, right? Instead, the goal should be like we want to see transformation involved. We want to see, you know, people changed for the good. And ultimately, you know, like we're not totally in charge of all that. Like we need Christ, we need Jesus to intervene on their behalf for them, or hopefully he's already started that process and is sanctifying them. But nonetheless, right, like it's our goal even in this field, which is, you know, you know, it's money. It can seem to be very much a transaction basis to instead put these pieces in, right, where relationships become the most valuable piece to things. I've had that modeled really well for me at our firm. Like I said, we're faith focused or faith driven. We're not necessarily like we have that on the billboard outside our workplace. But like our planners really do have a very keen interest on seeing relationships grow and foster. And so that's an important thing that I just was able to kind of walk into. But it's really neat whenever you see just this material, right? Like the CFP board understands something that we can really get at. You know what I mean? As we kind of go through a faith-focused approach to this material, and that is we need to be people who, above and beyond, care for the hearts and souls of others. And we can do that, right? We can do that through money. And it's interesting too, because usually money conversations lead down that deeper and darker path, or deeper path, right? Hopefully not darker. That deeper path that helps us understand more of, who we are. And so, um, yeah, so let's kind of go through those different skills, right? Like as a planner, you should have the skill of establishing a relationship with clients, meeting with new clients, understanding and being able to tell them that relationship that you're going to have with them. The second skill would be gathering data. So this is kind of like, those initial documents, but then that second part, the cash flow planning part, right? Like there is a very real skill to be able to kind of navigate this path of a client relationship thing, right? Like this is probably the most Excel spreadsheet place, right? If you're a math person and you like the numbers behind things, right? You can geek out on this. At our office, we do planning every Wednesday and Friday. Like we'll sit down and discuss the week's clients or new clients or reviews that we need to go over. And we love it, right? Because this is our chance at that point to look at these different, situations. Where is this person at? What are they telling us? But even then, most of our conversation ends up not leading down the path of what are these numbers like, but it leads us down the path of like, what is this person like? And what makes this person tick? And are they a spender or a saver? They a instant gratification person or they delayed gratification person? What's their household like and the dynamics within that? And so it all does really breathe through that first question, right? Like, can you understand people as you build a relationship with them, right? Because all the different ways that you can mix our money scripts, the things and ways that we understand money and how it relates to our childhood and how it relates to our present. It's so intertwined with who we are now. And then you mix that in a household where you've got two people, one is a certain way, the other is a certain way. And sometimes they clash, sometimes they complement, but all of that's on full display, and in a very, very vulnerable way, because money conversations are really hard, and a lot of times people are really nervous to discuss that. Yeah, I'll stop there and ask you guys any question. If you guys have ever had an opportunity, have you ever sit down, I guess, Sheena, you've had that, being in your role in financial aid, you've experienced that dynamic a little bit with just discussing money and things with people. But have the rest of you guys ever been in that situation where you realize, man, we have to talk about money and that's going to lead us down a path that maybe is a little bit challenging, You guys have any examples of that? If not, that's okay.
I think like
I
just
currently,
interactions with like brothers or siblings informally have been kind of in that vein, but nothing formal like what you guys do for work.
Yeah, it's
I
really
know
cool. Go right ahead, Jason.
I was just saying, I prepare taxes, so sometimes I have conversations with people about money, or
Yeah.
they'll end up owing they didn't expect to, and what do I do now?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, I don't know the whole picture because it's not really like a fully developed relationship, but get to talk with them a little bit about things.
Yeah, no, totally. I get it, man. Yeah, it doesn't take much, you know what I mean, to let conversations lead down that path with friends, with family members. And then also, yeah, if you're dealing with people helping them out with taxes, that's going to get brought up. So
I guess I work with credit card fraud, so it's a little bit different kind of difficult conversations with customers, but um, sometimes usually it's not good news for them when I talk to them.
Yeah, that would be, gosh, that would be, yeah. A lot of times of course, it's needed though, right? Like you gotta help them be able to fix the problem that they're in there. So, all right, so let's keep going through these. Planning skill 3, you've got basically figuring out like what data needs to be collected, right? And so this is more not so the numbers like in planning skill 2, but more just about the softer side, like the art of financial planning. And so I'll be honest, and I know Dr. Annette, it kind of leans toward focusing on worldview, which is a very big aspect of this right here. Your social factors that influence kind of your money thoughts and beliefs and attitudes. My emphasis in the personal financial academic world also focuses on this kind of really what I looked into is like money scripts, financial situation and change, and relative income as opposed to um, absolute income. Like what's social set factors? Does your neighborhood affect you in your financial journey? At least how you feel you're doing in your financial journey, even more than how you're actually doing, I guess, even more than the absolute income might. So anyway, that's a big part of what we do. And again, I kind of tend to probably even overemphasize the softer skills that are required in these relationships. And what's interesting too is like a lot of times when you meet with clients, um, like sometimes like we've got our the guy who founded our firm. His name is Pat Benson, and he's so relational. His ability to be able to make a human connection with someone, instantly when they come into the room, that's so valuable, and a big part of what we do in financial planning is developing that trust relationship that you can have with somebody, because ultimately they're going to have to open up to you, and you're going to find out things, that a lot of people even close to them don't know. And so to, have that, and be able to kind of like have them confide in you those things is really an important part of the process. That's nothing you're probably going to read too much about when it comes to, the main nitty-gritty parts of the coursework, but it's a big part of it too, right? Because like a lot of times it's the financial counseling and the financial therapy side of things. Like, so a lot of times people need to kind of reorient a little bit of their expectation for money. And I always say this too, and this kind of goes in a little bit to that number 4 here, is very few people just fit in this really nice little comfortable spot when it comes to money and finances, and then how it relates to our minds, and how it relates to how we feel, right? And so like the greed feared spectrum is a great example of that, right? Like very few people have like a nice little happy in between where it's like, hey, I understand I need money, but I'm not fearful because I know, uh, I have a good job. God will provide. If I lose my job, I can find another, versus the greed mentality. Like I want it all. Hey, how much is enough? Never enough, right? That's what greed is. And so very few people fit happily in that perfect middle. Well, oftentimes we find ourselves leaning toward one or leaning toward the other, and that shows up drastically, of course, in planning relationships. But even in some other ones, just like money focus, how much attention are we giving to our finances? Are you a bean counter? Are you the one that's like every day looking at all of your investments and all of your bank accounts, making sure it all works together and just two eyes on it at all times, and the whole rest of the world's going on, and you're just way too money focused? Or are you just like, whatever, I don't pay attention to it. I've got who knows how much in credit card debt, right? Like we live in a world where very few people, right? Mostly because of our nature, a lot of it is the sin in our hearts, but like we want to focus too much or too little, right? Give greed or give fear too much of a place and a hold in that financial world in our lives. And so we have to understand how to collect that process. Where are you at it? And I will say sometimes it's like, it's kind of interesting. So like, take the Dave Ramseyans, probably shouldn't, bring up his name too much, but like, he can tell people focus too much on it. And if someone's already oriented that way, man, that's like, you're giving them too much of that attention. And then vice versa can also be the case, right? Like where sometimes you're like, just chill out, it's going to be okay. Well, you already don't pay much attention to it. Maybe you should give a little bit more attention, focus, and intentionality to your money. So those are all aspects of kind of the psychological, the social aspects of what flows into the planning process and things that you have to kind of gather on the side. And so I've got some other examples of some different, the Kingdom Advisors have actually done a really good job of putting out some products out there that kind of help clients see in a snapshot where they're at. Like one is, spend, give, save, all these different categories, and you can kind of see how they flow from one to the other. Framing our goals and objectives. Okay, like that's a big aspect of what we are doing, right? Because ultimately in the end, more is not a good goal and it's actually not a good objective, right? And so like yeah, sometimes more is good. Sometimes people need more, right? But you actually it helps to go through the goal setting process with clients as well. So yeah, I'm trying to think like a good example, like if you said, hey, I want to save $25,000 for the purchase of a newer used vehicle in 2 years. Would that be a goal or would that be an objective?
Objective?
Correct. Right. And if you said, hey, it's my desire to leave like um a legacy to my kids, that's going to have where they're going to see and understand what it's like for me to model giving. Like that would be an objective, or sorry, that would be a goal, right? Like it's a bigger concept and idea of what we're talking about here. So let's keep going. Planning skill number 7, right, are the tools and techniques, that analyzation, the evaluating of a client's status and where they're at. So again, I come back to software at this point because there's a lot of really cool tools out there that we can use. Skill number 8, mastering the tools and techniques that are involved in using those. Number 9 is these kind of larger controlling ideas of what drives our economy and the systems, right? Like, can you actually, in a simplified way, describe these different big economic concepts? It's so interesting, right? Because like whenever I taught this type of material 5 years ago, even this kind of stuff wasn't really to like take inflation, right? Like what? I mean, who's talking about inflation? It's 2019. It's not an issue. It's a non-issue. And now we've gotten smacked in the face with a few years of it. And it's like all over the news, even just your average everyday person is talking about it, right? Because what a great excuse to complain in line at the grocery store. And it's a big deal. And it's also something that clients will bring up, they'll expect to have an understanding at least of at least the driving forces in our economy, and how they relate to what's going on in the market. And so I don't know, of all the things, that's probably one that's like, probably not going to be like big time tested for on it, especially on the CFP exam, but you need to have an idea of those things. I would say at least for certifications as well, like The SIE exam is going to have that stuff. The Series 7 is going to have it. The Series 66 exam has a lot of that material in there where it's going to ask you questions about, you know, inflation, employment, all the relationships that go into those things. Planning skill number 10. We're almost done with these, I think. Yeah, 2 more. Different strategies, right? In understanding kind of like the different ways that we can pull tools out of the toolbox and use them. And so there have been, you know, instances when you're in a sitting across the table from a client and they go, man, you know, like I didn't even realize my spouse had $20,000 in credit card until we sat down in this meeting. And you're like, what? You guys didn't even know, you never even share that to your spouse that you've been kind of digging yourselves in a pit. Like, we need to encounter that before we really start focusing on even like saving money into a Roth IRA. It doesn't matter. You got 24% credit that you're paying, you know, to a credit card company right now. Like that's what we need to focus on, right? Like, you're too busy fishing while there are holes in the boat. Put first things first. And then, of course, understanding that development of how to actually build out a recommendation for clients. So those are the skills. Here we talk a little bit about, and this Dr. Annette kind of goes into more detail about some different theories and hypotheses that drive our industry. Of course, this is one that's called the life cycle hypothesis. And for every great theory out there now, there's a behavioral theory on also related to that. And so there's also a behavioral life cycle hypothesis. But really, the simple idea is that in a normal world, you would go through this process where you grow your net worth until you get to the point where you're going to spend it in retirement. What's funny though is like, it is a behavioral thing, because you know how many people get to this point and they don't want to see their money go down. They don't want to spend it. They end up living out their retirement years on Social Security, even though they have retirement savings. It's just they've always been taught, I save, not spend. I accumulate. I don't, you know, go through to savings. And so it is kind of an interesting concept. I think it's actually helpful to see this, right? And even like, yeah, here's your concept of the adapted life cycle hypothesis, where Dr. Annette talks more about like, let's talk more about the kingdom asset as opposed to just consumption and spending, right? Because if that's all that's there, then we're kind of leaving a lot to be wanted. And so here are a few simple little kind of fill in the blanks that kind of supposed to resound through that. And I think the idea is, hey, here's what, you know, the text says, and then also now we get to this section, it's kind of talking more about our heart as Christian financial planners, and what would that look like? Well, it should be, you know, about all of those other things, but it should also, there should be something that's life breathing through all of that, right? And that is that ultimately we're working, you know, for the purpose of greater God's kingdom, not just making people rich for the sake of them getting rich and me in the process. And so that's kind of what he means by the new planning purpose and destination, right? What is the kingdom assets as we look at how it see it flow into how we consume, but also how we give, right? And is there like a final number you get to where it's like, you know, I don't want to see myself grow into this greed mentality. And so I'm going to create a plan even beyond, you know, for later down the road, I'm going to create a plan. And out of that, I'm going to establish a giving intent where any amount above what this amount is, I'm going to dedicate to giving, because I don't need any more, right? Like John Wesley said, like, I'm going to make as much as I can, give away as much as I can. And he ultimately like found himself comfortable living on income long before he made money off royalties from books and things like that. And then when that money started coming in, he gave it all away, right? Because he still had enough to live on, and he was happy with that, which is a cool story. So here we said, you know, financial planning. now becomes about helping equip a person to spend and enjoy their riches that they already have, which is a much different type of destination. Personal financial planning transforms to interpersonal financial planning. Use the process of interpersonal financial planning to prioritize, affirm, and express the rich lifestyle that has already been given to us from Christ Jesus. And then use the process of financial planning to protect us from the dangers of both consumption and wealth. And so this is an example. As a matter of fact, I saw him give this in the worldview speech at the Certified Kingdom Advisors Conference, where basically, you've got the Dead Sea, which doesn't have an outlet, right? Like money or water sits stagnant in it. It's dead. And then the Sea of Galilee has water that flows out of it, which means that it has a system that's teeming with life, right? And so if we don't have an outlet, if our goal and purpose is just to accumulate and grow and grow and grow our assets, are we dead in that? And that would be that example. And so it's a really cool illustration that he gives. It's funny because my father-in-law is a pastor in Kansas City. He brought I was there visiting a few weeks back, and he brought up the idea is, are we like the Dead Sea? And he almost used this exact illustration. He didn't talk about the Sea of Galilee. And I came up to him, I was like, hey, where did you hear that idea from? Because I had been presented with this idea just a few weeks back. And he's like, no, it's just a common saying there. So then after this, we kind of dive into the math of things. This is more like chapter 2 here. Okay. And so cash flow planning, I'm going to go ahead and jump into this real quick, probably give me just a few minutes to go over these things. Obviously, a lot of times what we need to do with clients, just on the practical end of things, is understand if they are cash flow positive or negative, if adjustments and changes needed to be made to their plan. And so practically speaking, no one comes in with a budget. Like nobody. One in 20, even in our small community, maybe 1 in 20 people starting the process with us will come in having a real understanding of what they spend, at least having a budget. And even then, that budget's probably not too accurate. They tend to underestimate expenses, especially those things that aren't on a monthly basis. And more variable in how they come in and out. And so what we do in our financial planning process is we do encourage them to go home, track their spending for a month, be realistic about what they're spending, right? Because it's easy in financial planning to figure out the number that can come out, right? Like you can use a 4% rule for retirement assets. You can spend your pensions, your social securities, and then we can figure out in the financial planning process if a retirement plan might be able to work for them. But in reality, you have to know how much money is going out. And the truth is, no one ever wants to cut back, right? So to tell someone, oh, you can retire, you just need to spend less. That's not a reality. It doesn't work well. People don't change their behaviors, especially behaviors that they've already established for years and years and years. And so it's really important for us, as we go through the financial planning process, to try to be able to at least come to a conclusion on what's spent going out. What are they spending? What are they using for living expenses on a monthly basis? What is their consumption expectation? And so the budget's the greatest option, right? Like if someone actually does do that, but very few people do. And so what we have to do then instead is kind of come to this backdoor way of figuring out how much are they able to put back, how much are they making, and usually you can come to a conclusion on their spending from that, and actually get pretty accurate at it as well. But yeah, I mean, the most challenging of plans is whenever you sit down with someone and you realize that they are going to have to try to make a significant change. They're going to have to spend less in retirement. because we just know that so often you see people who, at least they're, even if they commit to it and say they're going to do it and write on paper, I'm only, going to spend so much on this and that. The truth is, it is pretty ingrained in, not say it's impossible, but it's pretty ingrained in them that they're going to be able to, that they're going to have a consumption expectancy, and it's gonna be hard for them to make changes to that. So as we go through this process, just understand the in and out, basically what's flowing in, what's flowing out of their financial picture, right? We have financial ratios we can use that kind of give us a gauge of where they're at in terms of their near-term debts, their long-term debts, how much they're bringing in. Sometimes people just have an income issue. They just haven't been able to find that job that is able to pay or afford them the opportunity to get ahead or create margin in their life. And so, it's our job to kind of come alongside of them and help them realize that process. Whenever I've been able to do simple budgeting with people, a lot of times like doing some pro bono stuff, just trying to help people who are struggling with their finances or in debt. I used to kind of force and spoon feed them this budget. A blank piece of paper is actually kind of like the best thing for them. Hey, I want you to try to like create your own spending. How much do you spend? How much should you spend? Right? Create your own budget. Just do it on paper, right? And then we'll make modifications and changes to it and make it real good. And it's going to be yours. And you're going to own it. And it's going to be awesome. That's usually the times when people are able to have, at least from my experience, the most success with this kind of stuff. Of course, that's a lot of times different from like a financial planning process. That's more like financial, counseling, just trying to help people go through those different dig themselves out of the debt in life. And so here you see some basics, right? Like dedicated and discretionary spending, income from earned or unearned. What are some examples of unearned income?
Rental income.
Yep, if you had rental. What else?
Dividends.
Yep. Yeah, any type of investment income like a dividend would fit there. And so the goal would be to create discretionary cash flow. So I use a term for this, right? Margin. Like, do you have margin? Are you creating a system where you have you are able to put some money back and earmark it? Is it, whether that would be toward long-term savings, retirement savings, kids' college plans, all those things. You need margin to do that. You need space. And man, like that advice goes above and beyond finance. You know what I mean? Like a lot of times people just need margin in their time in life. Not to say you're not always afforded that, especially if you have a parent and kids and you're taking college classes and, you're up at in the late evening hours going through this kind of stuff. But like, margin is so valuable. And finding ways to try to create that margin is a big deal. So again, these are things probably that kind of just help you line out the financial planning process in more distinct terms. Expenses that can be reduced. This is hard, right? Like, because this plays into your values and your goals in financial planning. You look at someone and it's so easy. I do this. I'm really bad at this because I am, I consider myself money vigilant when it comes to the money script that I am. I have a difficult time when I think people are frivolous or when they are always and constantly, never dialing back their spending. So they have all the things, the trips, the cars, and they're making sure everyone on social media can see all the stuff that they buy. Like, not judging people. It's so difficult. And sometimes people do need to be told, like, listen, you're out of line in spending in this category or in that category. But you know, also like in the financial planning process, if like I'm a professional and I'm sitting across from the table, you know, first I have to build a relationship with someone before I can even approach, you know, broach this subject. But sometimes that becomes a conversation because you can't get beyond it until they free up free cash flow, right? Like Dave Ramsey, like will ream people about new cars because a lot of times they will basically take all the margin that they have in life and they're putting it into their car payment, you know? And so that's a thing where he's like, no, you got to just sell the car. You've got to do that to free up, you know, to be able to put money into an account to watch it grow, right? To get excited about your finances, you have to do this hard thing and cut back here or there. Looking at debt levels and then looking at, of course, these different ratios that help us understand kind of where you should be at. And they're you know, they're good. They're baseline ideas that help us understand how much is enough for a house, you know, how much is too much credit, how much should we spend, how much should we save, or am I at risk in the near term of not being able to pay my bills off? And then some things about, you know, restructuring your debt. And sometimes that the planning process does go down that path. Like, hey, we got to figure out a solution to get. You just can't keep doing the thing that you're doing, right? These are usually probably not. This is almost like a lot of times I have conversations with people in their 20s and 30s about this kind of stuff. Every once in a while, older, you know, but just the idea of like even having some money set aside in emergency savings. A lot of times younger people are the ones you're talking to that just don't quite understand the need that you have to create a little bit of space just in case, because oh man, stuff comes up all the time, right? Where you're gonna find yourself in in the rat race and new car, or you need a car breaks down, your roof's leaking, all those different things you hear about. So as we kind of march towards this week's goals and process, like I said, I'll move the deadline back a day for you to make everything due moving forward on Monday nights. What questions do you guys have? Is there anything that you've been looking through, or as you've been scouring the material, things that you wanted to talk about today? Well, I'm here for you. All right. So don't hesitate to, uh, you know, reach out if you guys have questions. Okay. All right.
I got a quick one.
Yeah, go ahead, Sergio.
We were talking about the art and the science of like dealing, like simplifying a big folder of information into like something that can relate to a client. I heard on a podcast this book called The One Page Financial Plan. I don't know if you've heard of it. Is that kind of what you're talking about? Is that worth reading through, or to
Yeah, I actually have not read it, but it looks really good.
okay.
And I will say a lot of the research out nowadays is like, because like man, what was it? Money Guide Pro and eMoney, both of them. I mean, they'll put out 80-page documents, PDFs, like, you know what I mean? Like export, give it to the client, like a whole folder of stuff. And like, honestly, most clients, by the time you get through an hour and 20 minutes of a recommendation meeting, which is like the heart and soul of what you're doing, they're like, eyes are rolling back of their head. They're like, so like, I'm done. We can wrap it up, you know? And so being able to present something in a concise, meaningful way is huge. And so I think that there's a lot. I think there's probably a lot of really good stuff in that book. It's probably it probably geeks out on the profession a little bit, you know, like I don't know if you follow like Michael Kitces or some of those guys, but like probably going to be in that vein a little bit, but still, hopefully, I think the theme is simplify it, take the most important aspects of financial planning and put it all together. So good stuff.
Thanks.
Yeah. All righty, y'all. Well, I appreciate it. Thanks, Seven, Sheena, Jason, and Sergio. Thanks for coming in and have a good week. We'll see you guys. Oh, next week, I'm gonna have to do a recording for you guys. Okay, so that's the 1 week I think that I'm gonna not be able to do Monday night. So I'll be putting that out and posting it over the weekend. But yeah, I'll be traveling that evening. So all righty. Thank you guys.
Have a good 4th.